Skip Schumaker wins NL Manager of the Year for 2023. Should he have, though? We're going to talk about that. Plus, the Marlins make some roster moves ahead of the Rule 5 draft. They add 2 to the 40-man. But why no Troy Johnston? Plenty to get into on today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England. Welcome to Locked On Marlins. This is your Daily Marlins podcast. I'm your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up, of course, on X at Miami Marlins_UK. If you're listening to the pod, of course, hit subscribe. This is your team every day, and thanks to making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. There is a YouTube channel. Of course, guys, if you are watching, you will see the Locked On graphics guys have been working hard. Look at that new graphics package at the bottom. Equally, look at that new graphics package on the side. The new rundown, baby. Boys are working hard. Make sure you hit subscribe on YouTube. Also, welcome to Wednesday's episode, the 15th of November. And there is a ton to get into on today's episode. But before we do that, this episode is sponsored by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50 plus infections. That's over 50 infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASE for Jase and jasemedical.com. All right, guys, tons to get into today. The news that dropped late from a UK perspective yesterday, and actually even later, was the roster moves. But the news that Skip Schumaker is the NL Manager of the Year. And we're going to talk about that in depth and equally consider, should he have? I know he did, and that's great, but we're going to talk about that. Should he be the Manager of the Year for the NL? There's definitely another candidate that I think should have been in consideration if they potentially voted on this in a different way. Nevertheless, we'll also talk about the Rule 5 roster moves. The Marlins had a ton of spots open, and they ended up making 2. Controversially, I would say. There's a few names that weren't protected. So the question will be, is why? And we'll talk about that after the ad. The second ad, first ad, there's a few ads today. Let's start with the Skip Schumaker news, though. The NL Manager of the Year. As we know, the 3 finalists for that, Craig Counsell, Skip Schumaker, Brian Snitker from the Atlanta Braves. Skip Schumaker ends up winning the award. Craig Counsell was second with his Brewers, now with the Cubs. And Brian Snitker in third place in a powerhouse Braves team that eventually flopped in the postseason. Firstly, what I would say is, well done, Skip. I must say my first impressions of Skip, I've not wavered on them. That's the thing about Skip. Like, he's such a good communicator in terms of what people should expect of him. And that's fans. I guess that's players. And for me, I feel like Skip just does the basics well and right. And that's half the battle, is getting the basics right. And in any team environment, in any team culture, one of the fundamentals, if not the fundamental, in my opinion, having worked in many team environments, maybe not sports teams, but team environments nonetheless, one of the most critical, if not the most critical aspects is communication. Communication. And Skip Schumaker absolutely can communicate at the perfect level with the players. He's only recently, retired from the game. So he understands what the modern day player needs in terms of comms. And particularly what I would say is Skip Schumaker being, in some ways a utility guy, a bench guy, a little bit uncertain from day to day about whether they're playing, where they are playing, why are they playing, when they're not playing, why they're not playing, all of these questions. And I think that's the one takeaway from Skip. There's a few takeaways, but the one thing that really stood out to me, and I think maybe it was Garrett Cooper that called this out at some point last season before he was traded, obviously, that there's this open line of communications regarding lineups and a understanding or an explanation as to why you're not in the lineup on that particular day. And I think that whoever was speaking about it, I think it was Garrett Cooper. It may have been someone else. Please, someone fact check me on that one and let me know who it was. Maybe multiple guys talking about it. But for me, it takes away the guesswork. It takes away the mental energy. And it creates a communication channel where you just have an understanding of why the decision's being made, how it impacts you. If you need to be doing something better, then what do I need to do, Skip? Let me know. Rather than the uncertainty of, am I in the bad books? Have I done something wrong? Am I not playing well? All of these things in a game that is fundamentally a mental game, I would say, with baseball, particularly as a hitter, where you are dealing with the mental stresses of baseball in general. The last thing you need is any other mental challenges around, what's Skip thinking? If you've got that also entering your space, you don't have the ability to just solely focus on what you got to do. So for me, that was the one thing that stood out to me about Skip Schumaker. Let me know what you think about Skip Schumaker. Did he deserve this? Did he deserve the NL Manager of the Year? And I wanted to just segue into that because from the very first press conference, I was all in on Skip Schumaker. I never heard of Skip Schumaker before he was with the Marlins. But I was so impressed with what I heard straight away. And nothing ever wavered from that. Those post-game presses in particular, I would say, with Skip Schumaker. Win or lose, you would get meaningful answers, meaningful insight, an understanding of what's going wrong, what's going well, etc., etc. A few years ago with Don Mattingly, I must say, when I'd hear Donnie's presses, I wouldn't know what the result was, to be honest with you. And with Skip Schumaker, you know what the result is. You know whether the Marlins have won or lost. And there is some detailed responses back to the media questions around why. If they want to pick at something, Skip will answer it you directly. Love that. Again, it all comes down to a Skip communication. Unbelievable communicator. So he wins the award. For the top three that were there, it was nailed on. It was a lock. As soon as those were announced as the top three, I was like, that's a lock. However, we do have to consider the timing of the voting or what the voting includes or doesn't include. The Marlins ended up as the 5 seed, let's not forget, having finished with just 69 wins in 2022 in what was an abysmal season. They end up winning 84 games, making the postseason as the 5 seed, not just scraping in. They were the 5 seed, 5th best team in the NL were your Miami Marlins. And that's exactly why Skip Schumaker has won the NL Manager of the Year. The interesting part here is you then look at the postseason and the 6 seed Diamondbacks ended up going on, obviously, a crazy run, knocking everyone out under the sun, and then obviously getting beaten in the World Series. So if you were going to include that body of work, then, the Diamondbacks manager, who's been recently extended, which is probably a good idea, and we'll talk about that in a sec. But, Lavulo, oh man, here we go again. This is it, pronunciation issues for Peter Pratt, right? For Tory. Oh man. For the Diamondbacks manager, who's just been recently extended, I must say, through 2026, I believe. He really should be the NL Manager of the Year, right? Like that, the way, when you look at the end result of the year, the Diamondbacks being the best team in the NL, once you've got through this postseason tournament, however you want to phrase it, he should have been. But that is not included in the voting. Postseason does not matter. It's all about the regular season for this. Is that right? Is that right? When we look back and you go, man, Skip Schumaker won Manager of the Year. The Marlins got bounced in the wild card. What happened to the Diamondbacks manager, whatever his name is? I mean, surely he should have been Manager of the Year, right? He was absolutely Manager of the postseason by the results anyway. I didn't actually really watch any of the games that closely, so I don't know if he impacted things that directly or not. But let me just go back to Skip, just talking about his impact. I just wanted to just segue back to that as well. Sorry, guys. My mind is scattering here. With Skip Schumaker, the other standout for me was early on in the year and pretty much when the Marlins were winning. and they had their winning runs. And they had a few, winning runs, I would say, through 23, which propelled them to this situation. Skip Schumaker's kamikaze approach to bullpen management was one of the standouts for me. He had his own way, and that was to just go to the guys that he trusted again and again and again as best he could. And the bullpen suffered from that. There was like a little wobble. I think the whole team suffered, to be honest with you, but the bullpen was like the absolute heart of the Marlins in 2023 and their performance. The bullpen nails. That will forever be the term that I remember. Skip Schumaker's management of that, it ended up being the right way. They got the result from a regular season perspective that they were looking for. So he did it his way. He communicated with everyone in his way. And he absolutely deserved to be the NL Manager of the Year. Based on the regular season, postseason included, you would say probably not. He would maybe be second. But with that being said, the one final thing to say on Skip Schumaker before we hit the ad and then we talk about Rule 5 roster moves is we have to applaud Kim Ang's foresight on this one. Kim Ang was the one that identified Skip Schumaker. Kim Ang was the one that sold him internally. Kim Ang was the one that had to deal with all of the internal politics around we prefer someone else. It was Kim Ang that made the decision and pressed it and convinced Bruce Sherman. And we have to say that is a parting gift from Kim Ang. The final piece here, Skip Schumaker, just to remind you, he's under contract in 2024. There's also a team option in 2025. We've just seen the Diamondbacks extend their dude until 2026. I don't know how to say his name now. I'm feeling the pressure under that. I don't know. I need to go and listen to something. What is it with guys? Where are the John Smiths in baseball? We need more John Smiths. We need less Torey Lavulos and more John Smiths to help Peter Pratt Locked On Marlins and his pronunciation issues. But I spoke about it last week. Spoke about it the week before. Are we going to resolve this Skip Schumaker contract situation sooner rather than later? Or are we going to go into 2024 with a team club option hanging over Skip? Skip has nothing more to prove. He's one of the best managers in the business, one of the best young managers in the business right now. And he richly deserved this award. I would love to see the Marlins just handle the business with Skip. Commit to him if he wants to commit as well. We don't know that. We assume he wants to commit, but he may not. I don't know. It was a big family commitment for him to take this role in Miami. He's a West Coast guy, obviously. So he may not want to. But if he's open to it, I would love to see the Marlins just commit to Skip now. Get it done. Align front office, including manager. They've got that connection. They've got the time to work together. See what magic they can cook up in 24 and beyond. It's time for our first ad of the day, guys. And delighted to let you know about our good friends over at Jase Medical, of course. Hold on, we need some sexy graphics too, so let's get them pumped. There's way too much going on here. Nevertheless, here you go. Here's your Jase Medical. And guys, we spend a lot of time talking together. You and I, yes, we do. We spend at least 5 times a week. We get fired up together on wins and losses, who starts, who sits. I'm thankful for that connection we have. But today, I want our chats to be a little bit more personal. I just learned that you can get a 1-year supply on ED medications. You realize what that means. Bring on extended travel. Bring on the next natural disaster or supply chain issue. You are covered, my friends. You don't have to worry about whether or not you can refill your Viagra prescription or others. This is possible because our friends at Jase Medical. Go online right now at jasemedical.com to receive your 12-month supply on your daily medication. Remember to use the promo code LOCKEDON at checkout for a discount as well. Make sure you get that discount. Here's a verified customer, and they had this to say about Jase. I'm thankful for this service. Supply chain issues caused me to cut pills in half to have it. I ordered most of my daily meds with a year's supply. I also ordered the antibiotic kit. I feel secure now. Prices are lower than pharmacies. I highly recommend this for everyone. If you or someone you love would love to get some peace of mind by having a year's supply of any daily med, go to jasemedical.com to see if it's offered for you. Remember to use the promo code Locked On. That's all caps, all one word, Locked On, for $20 off your purchase. All right, guys, welcome back. This is Wednesday's episode of Locked On Marlins with me, Peter Pratt. Skip Schumaker is the NL Manager of the Year. We are now talking Rule 5 roster moves. And there were a few of them yesterday, and they came in late. I think they came in even later than the Skip Schumaker news. So, as always, the Marlins and their roster moves, they were late. And there was some surprises, some non-surprises. I don't know. Depends. Let me know what you think about this one. Let me just tell you what happened. I want to take a step back from it then and also talk about what didn't happen. And equally, what could still happen in this one. So the Marlins, they had decisions to make on multiple guys. They ended up adding just 2 guys to the roster, to the 40-man. And the Rule 5 draft, for those that maybe are wondering like about this Rule 5 situation, like what the hell is it? Because this is kind of like a confusing draft. For those that may be new to the game and to our international followers like myself and haven't followed baseball a long time. But effectively, once a player has reached a certain level of time within the organization, 4 or 5 years, depending on the age you enter the organization, at that point, there's a Rule 5 draft. And at that point, clubs need to make a decision for those that are eligible, whether to protect them on their 40-man rosters or potentially those players become unprotected and available via the Rule 5 draft. If you are drafted in the Rule 5 draft, you have to remain on the 26-man roster for the entire year. And there is stuff linked to the IL as well, so you can't just like take them and stash them on the IL. Effectively, if you are drafting someone, they are on your roster the whole year. If not, you have to send them back. So I think that's really critical to understand like what the Rule 5 is and what the restrictions are. This isn't just like, can you scoop up anyone and just send them down to AA? No. The guys you're selecting are being selected to be on your major league roster the entire year. I know people will spend time on the IL, but there's restrictions there. So that's what the Rule 5 is. And I think that's really important to just remember because whilst the Marlins had, I think, 5 spots available in terms of their 40-man, they had multiple decisions to make on guys. The guys they added to the 40-man, thus making them unavailable or protected from the Rule 5 draft, Victor Mesa Jr. and Anthony Maldonado. We'll talk about those guys. However, as you can see, there's a third name on my list on the rundown, and that is Troy Johnston. He, although was the minor league player of the year for the Marlins, was not added to the 40-man. Thus, could be selected in the Rule 5 draft and be taken to another organization. There's a small transactional fee attributed to that. It's relatively low cost, but effectively someone now can scoop up Troy Johnston and he then has to be on their major league roster for the entire year. But there is no trade required, etc. At that point, they effectively get him for free, less that transaction fee. So let's take a step back in general from this. The Marlins had a ton of spaces available on the roster, so they had plenty of flexibility to do what they wanted to do. Other teams, I would say, may be facing into some challenges and could have been exploring some trade opportunities. The Marlins, I think, have benefited from that in the past couple of years. They made a move last year for Xavier Edwards, JT Jaguar. There's clubs around, particularly the Rays, seemingly, that have these roster issues because they've just got a lot of talent and they've got a lot of organizational depth, and it's hard to keep them all. And they love the 40-man carousel, right? On the roster carousels, the Rays for sure. So at some point, if you have too much depth and these guys are available, teams look to make some moves, make some trades to effectively make sure they get something back if indeed they think they're going to lose a guy to the Rule 5 draft. However, the other risk they take is that these guys who may not be major league ready are drafted, go to a club, they maybe flame out at the big league level and they're a competitive club. Thus, they end up being returned back to their original organization. It's a pretty complicated situation, this Rule 5 situation. And in some ways, from me, haven't been following baseball for years, I must say, I do question like the necessity of the Rule 5 draft now. I question the necessity of it, where the talent at the big league level and the variance, I'd say, between like the minor leagues and the big leagues is so vast, so big, it's only getting bigger, it seems. Like, I do wonder whether the Rule 5 is truly necessary and really what value it delivers. When I think of Rule 5 guys, I just think of immediately of Elieser Hernandez, who actually for a rebuilding club at the time, he was fine. But as soon as the Marlins wanted to start getting competitive, then it was, his performance dropped the touch and the injuries kicked in and et cetera, et cetera. But Elieser ended up, becoming disposable in that point. And so maybe the Rule 5 is there to kind of support non-competed teams, give them some cheap young talent, maybe for free, and let those guys have the opportunity to take big league reps at that point for that organization. I don't know. Let me know what you're thinking on that one, guys, because I think it's important to sit there and ask the question of what is the point of the Rule 5 draft? And I know in general what the point is, but is the juice really worth the squeeze with the Rule 5? Let's do the final ad, and we're going to talk about Victor Mesa Jr., we're going to talk about Anthony Maldonado, Troy Johnston, and a few other guys. We have to talk about Will Banfield in particular. Like, Marlins look pretty thin at catcher, and Will Banfield's, they've decided not to add him to the 40-man, which I think is interesting in some ways. So we'll talk about that. Before we do that, though, guys, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel. And guys, listen, it is NFL season right now. Absolutely. And you have to listen up right now. Tune in, particularly if you are a new customer. So you can score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. Yes, you heard that correctly. $150 if your team wins on a $5 money line bet. Stunning. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is super easy to use. They've got all the range of betting options you need. Spreads, player props, over-unders, and more. So you got to get yourself to FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL. All right, guys, you're back here with me, Peter Pratt, on Wednesday, the 15th of November. Final segment here. Feel like I've been rambling on a touch. There's a lot in my mind around this topic. Skip Schumaker, a lot in my mind. Rule 5, generally, a lot in my mind. The moves the Marlins made, plenty in my mind. Put out there last night that I didn't think that any Marlins player was a must-protect player. That they had to be on a 40-man. They had to be. I honestly felt that Victor Mesa Jr., Anthony Maldonado, Troy Johnston, or anyone, there's a really high probability that if they were left unprotected, they would either A, not be drafted by anyone, or B, would be drafted, would go to that big league roster, and would at some point in 2024 be returned to the Marlins at some stage. So I just wanted to call that out, that I don't think, Victor Mesa Jr. is not ready. Anthony Maldonado may be. I guess he's probably like the closest and obvious. Troy Johnston, I think, is interesting. We'll talk about him at the back end. But I just want to start with that. Just putting that out there. That I don't think any of these guys were must add. Are these difference makers for other clubs right now? I think the answer to that is no. It's different when you have a difference maker that's like obvious and a big league ready, etc., etc. Maybe Victor Mesa Jr. is. Maybe Anthony Maldonado is. Who knows? It's a big risk for these guys, particularly for clubs that are competing, right? It's a big risk. There's no passengers on these rosters. We see it for the Marlins. The amount of roster churn you have. A Rule 5 guy, they have to be like fundamentally everyday starters. And that is a huge ask to be getting an everyday starter out of a Rule 5 guy like Victor Mesa Jr., who's super young. Troy Johnston, who, frankly, hasn't had a single at-bat, clearly, at the big league level because he's not on a 40-man. He's not protected. But it's a huge risk. And, again, goes back to the point of, like, what is the point of Rule 5? Anyway. So, Victor Mesa Jr., I'm glad he's been added. It's a big name. His brother was a big name, too. But it obviously didn't work out for him. But Victor Mesa Jr., I would say, has been trending in the right way, pretty much all his Marlins career, frankly. He did well. He was obviously spent most time at AA Pensacola last year. And really, he had a good year, very good year. He, I guess his slug, 412 slug, impressive. His OPS, 720, impressive. 18 home runs, I think, was the big pop number, big standout there for Victor Mesa. was 18 bombs. So yeah, good for a 720 OPS. Couple of stolen bags, 16 of them, career high there on that point. Walks were okay as well. Like overall, it was a good year for Victor Mesa Jr. And he is absolutely trending in the right direction. He's only still 21, I believe, at this point. So, he's still young. He's still early in his career. But I think, the Marlins absolutely have something to work with here. We'll see. He's actually just turned 22, sorry. So apologies on the age. He's only just turned 22, just a month or two ago. But the Marlins have decided to protect him. And I think that was probably the right thing to do. They've then got 3 minor league options, obviously, with Victor Mesa now. So they've got 3 years now where he can be optioned back down. So in effect, the clock kind of ends on him as he approaches his age 26 year. So 3 option years on Victor Mesa. Again, if he was drafted in the Rule 5, would it have been likely? I'm not sure, but I like the commitment the Marlins have made there. And he's developing in the right way. Got some power. Plays center field, got some speed. There's plenty to like there. Anthony Maldonado is certainly an interesting name. Kevin Barral called me out on this one, saying he was a must-add player. He was saying, I think, that Troy Johnston was also a must-add. I've been speaking about Troy Johnston for a little bit last couple of weeks, and he is definitely not a must-add player, in my opinion. But Anthony Maldonado, I must say, he's 25 now. And when you look at his body of work in 2023, primarily at AAA, it was one hell of a body of work. He ends up with a 7-3 record, a 1.76 ERA in 34 appearances, no starts. So, that's some impressive numbers, some really impressive numbers. And I think I could see absolutely why, from an age perspective, a recent production perspective, that Anthony Maldonado certainly has an opportunity to make the bullpen out of spring, frankly. So, I can see exactly why the Marlins have gone there. The Marlins in general with like relievers and stuff, as we saw last year, there was guys coming up and down and up and down and rostered and all these changes going on. And so, it's interesting that we didn't see Maldonado at all last year, considering what he put up at AAA. Again, that's another interesting indicator. But I think in terms of protecting him and considering some of the other roster moves they've made, this one makes sense. Was he a must protect? I don't know. I think with that one, maybe I was a little bit harsh. And actually, maybe he was a must protect guy, because from his AAA numbers and his age, there is maybe a high leverage reliever in there potentially. And the Marlins, this is the interesting thing, is like a decent chunk of time last year, they needed a power righty. And, Maldonado could have fit that profile. He wasn't given that opportunity, which I think is interesting. I want to talk about Troy Johnston. Troy Johnston had a great year last year. So let's call that out. He wasn't, even though he had a great year, even though the Marlins had a good year, he didn't get any opportunities at all at the big league level. That was an indicator for me. Spoke about it last week on the pod. That I think Marlins Twitter, Marlins fans, prospect guys are way higher on Troy Johnston than the Marlins are. It kind of reminds me of a similar situation like with Lewin Diaz, where we were all like super high on Lewin and the Marlins never really were. And where does that leave Troy Johnston now? It leaves him available. And so I'm very intrigued to see if anyone takes him. But, for a guy that's 27, granted coming off a career season, 116 RBIs. I mean, that's one hell of a campaign. 26 home runs, 116 RBIs, OPS of 948. The numbers are absolutely eye-popping. So the question has to be is like, why wasn't he added? Why wasn't he added? And was it a mistake not to add Troy Johnston? Time will tell. But you have to think that with those types of numbers and his age, that if you were a team that had a need at first base or DH or something, or were happy to take the risk, he looks the type of guy that you would consider and say he looks like he could be big league ready. Based on the triple, like if it was, let me put it this way, if that was a sexier name that just put up those numbers in AAA, like all prospect lists and prospect guys would be going bananas for Troy Johnston. It's because it's Troy Johnston that no one's going bananas. However, it's because it's Troy Johnston that I'm not going bananas about it. So I don't quite know how to think about this one. I'm very intrigued to see if he gets drafted at all, even though he is unprotected. I don't know if the Marlins even look to trade him. Would they trade him? I don't know. I feel like they've just taken a calculated risk here, but frankly, there was no need to take a risk. And so that's the really interesting part here. Maybe the Marlins just don't value his skill set. Maybe they don't believe it's transferable to the big league level. So many questions with Troy Johnston. So many. I did just want to talk about Will Banfield briefly, because Will Banfield spent a ton of time at AA last year. You know, there's maybe a similar situation here to like Nick Fortes when he kind of burst onto the scene. Will Banfield, like, spoke about it on Monday's episode with the catching situation. I think Stallings is gone. So that's a spot open. Fortes will remain. And then it comes down to, you're going to carry 3 catchers on your 40-man. Maybe, maybe not. But it's interesting that the Marlins didn't. And to me, I don't know quite what that means just yet. But nevertheless, Will Banfield is available and unprotected. He wasn't protected. And so when it all comes out in the wash, the Marlins added 2 guys. Victor Mesa Jr., I don't think was big league ready and wouldn't have been selected. But he's definitely one of the top prospects for the Marlins. So I understand why they have. Anthony Maldonado looks like he could be big league ready. The Marlins definitely have a need for right-handed relief pitching heading into 24. And he could be given every opportunity to either make the roster or be up at the big league level. So we'll see. Troy Johnston left unprotected. Calculated risk? I don't know. Do the Marlins just not think his skill set translates to the big leagues? I don't know. I think that's a really interesting one. A lot of prospect guys, a lot of Marlins fans like him a lot. I'm not quite on the Troy Johnston hype train, as you probably guess. Nevertheless, I do think it's intriguing after that level of production that he isn't protected considering the age. Thus, another club may take a shot on him. Guys, we run out of time. Thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. I'll be back, of course, tomorrow as we start to consider, I'm starting to consider what opportunities exist for the Marlins at the shortstop position in terms of trades. I'm going to be looking at multiple options via trade for shortstop in a similar vein to some of those hidden gems at the catching spot. Look forward to talking to you then. I'll see you soon.